Welcome to the HOLDO MANEUVER podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Mike. We're two hard-working dads trying to immerse ourselves in Star Wars and fit it into our very busy lives.
If this is your first time listening to us in this short form, hopefully short form, Star Wars podcast. We'll share our thoughts on different topics from a galaxy far, far away.
Mark, how do the Tusken Raiders cheat on their taxes?
I'm not sure.
They always single file to hide their numbers.
Yikes.
You never know with me if it's going to be short form or long form, folks. To add that in there.
We've officially hit tax jokes. No. But yeah, this week it's episode 20 of the HOLDO Maneuver. We're going to be talking about the second half of the Disney Plus docuseries Light and Magic. So episode 4, 5, and 6. We talked about episodes 1, 2, and 3 last time. But before we get to that, we have just a few bit of news topics this week that we're going to cover that are primarily Rogue One related, as well as a little bit of Book of Boba Fett. So the first bit I will let Mike take.
Newsflash, folks. They're re-releasing Rogue One in theaters prior to Andor. I believe August 26th is the date.
Yes, sir.
Theaters, I don't think it's strictly IMAX. I think it's everywhere. I'm sure it'll be in majority of theaters across the nation.
Yeah, it says select, but it'll probably be like bigger markets, basically.
Yeah, it'll be in your state somewhere.
Yeah.
Or,
so, yeah, if you're a big enough Star Wars fan, you'll drive to go see it
will.
Again.
I never saw this in theaters. Never saw it in theaters. I remember sitting on my couch, like, at the end with, like, kind of welling up because it was so good. Being like, damn it, it would have been better on the big screen.
Yeah, I remember when this came out, I was working at GoDaddy at the time, and I had won some contest that they were doing, like some Star Wars trivia contest. And I had won tickets to, like, a private screening that was only GoDaddy employees to go watch Rogue One. And it was a couple weeks after it had come out, so, like, I had already gone and saw it in IMAX, like, myself, but so that was like my second time seeing it. But what's kind of cool about this too is that it's got like a exclusive look at the Disney Plus series of Andor. So that should be interesting to see, like, how long exactly, like, that new look is. Like, if it's like something that's like what 2 to 5 minutes or however long it might be, like an extended featurette type thing. So that should be interesting to see. And I would say this is definitely well worth seeing in IMAX, especially with, like, all the...
Find it near me in IMAX. I'll take the day off and go see it. I don't care.
Oh yeah, and if you have Disney Plus too, I assume we do. They should have the IMAX enhanced version on Disney Plus too.
I don't have a good enough TV for that, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like the same thing as seeing IMAX, but it, like, at least opens up to, like, what you can see, what will be the bigger aspect ratio for it. So that's kind of the cool thing about that. But this is cool that they're doing that. I wish they'd kind of maybe, like, done something like that for Obi-Wan, where maybe they re-released, like, Revenge of the Sith in theaters or something like that along those lines.
Part of me feels like this is a test to see how that would go.
Yeah. The other thing that would have been cool is because we know how they're doing the premiere as, like, a 3-episode thing, which is essentially a film unto itself. It's that. I mean, that would have been cool if they just put that in theaters too. They did, like, a double feature kind of thing. Although it'd kind of be weird because it'd be like
you're seeing the end.
Jump forward to the future, and then now let's rewind all the way back to the beginning.
Normal for Star Wars, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually how it was done. It was like here's the now that's the middle of the story though, because now there's 7, 8.
And
but
going back to what you said in the beginning, how you won a Star Wars trivia contest and won tickets to this. The last Star Wars trivia contest I won was at a roller skating party at Riva Rollerdrome when I think 10 or 11 years old. everyone else was flirting and having fun with girls, and I was at the frickin' booth with the DJ answering these questions, winning tiny little stuffed animals all day long.
Nice.
And that's when I knew I wasn't bright in the head compared to everyone else.
Well, you're bright in the head in a different way. But yeah, the only other Star Wars trivia thing that I won was more recently for The Mandalorian. And you'd assume, like, if you won, like, first place, you'd, like, the prizes were, like, Funko Pop figures. Mm-hmm. But you'd assume that if you won first place that you'd get, like, Din Djarin.
No.
The Mandalorian. Or at least Grogu. And the freaking Funko figure that they gave us was of Cara Dune. And I was like, oh, cool.
Throwing this away.
Yeah, so I ended up trading that into a local record shop that buys like pop culture stuff for me. So
it's so unfortunate because her character was pretty cool. I liked her.
Yeah. And yeah, but so the other Rogue One related thing that we had this week was recently Mondo, who's famous for like doing like these like really cool art posters from like different artists and whatnot, as well as different like limited edition vinyl records that they put out. They recently put out a Rogue One expanded edition 4X LP set. So I just had that sent to me in the mail recently, and it's 4 records, which is like there's about 6 tracks on each of these, so about 6, 7. There's a good amount of tracks in here. That there's at least like I'd say like around, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 8, 13. Yeah, there's like well over like 50 or so tracks in here of like Michael Giacchino's music from the film, and like the different records. This is an audio medium, so no one listening to this can see this, but I'm showing Mike. Like the different records have like
that's a nude photo of Johnny Depp. What are you showing me?
Hey, and that just has like this cool art that was done for these. I like this like kind of like really like black and white style that they did with these.
Yeah, I kind of got into the black and white more non-Star Wars related with Better Call Saul this past season. They did a lot of episodes.
I have to check that out still. I am on season 2 of that show. But I really like this, really I'm appreciative of this set that they did for this. Just because I like being able to have like access to like all this like Star Wars music, and especially like on like the vinyl record.
Right.
It's nice to be able to play that.
You just want to be Desmond in the Hatch, don't you?
Yep. Make my own kind of music. And actually, well, other Michael Giacchino, I do have there's another Michael Giacchino release that Mondo put out that was of when he did a concert of Lost related music a few years back. I am gonna give up putting this away for now because it is being a pain. Let's try. Oh, here we go. Never mind.
Movie scores have gone to the wayside in a way, but like really good ones, you can just listen to all day long.
Yeah, like especially Michael Giacchino, I really love like basically any kind of score that he's done recently over the past however many amount of years between like stuff that he did with Star Wars for Rogue One, or like with Marvel for like Spider-Man, and Pixar, and like everywhere in between. I just am like a big fan of his stuff. I would say that he's like after John Williams, he's probably like one of my favorite composers for stuff. So I would, if anybody has like a record player and likes movie score, I would definitely highly recommend to pick that up because it sounds great, and it's previously unreleased tracks too. There's a bunch on there, so if you liked the music a lot from this, then you would definitely want to pick this up and add it to your collection. But that is my kind of short, tiny review for that set that just came out. I'll leave a link in our show notes if anybody else does want to check that out too. But going from there, here's our last bit of news that's unrelated to Rogue One, and I will let Mike take it away.
The news is Book of Boba Fett Season 2 receives hopeful update, which is kind of a mislead because when you read the article, it's just, I'm going to butcher her name.
Ming-Na?
Yeah, Ming-Na Wen. Just being like, I hope we have it. I never count my chickens before they hatch. It's just, okay. Yeah. But I'm on the fence with this one because Book of Boba Fett, while I enjoyed it, just kind of ruined Boba Fett, like tarnished him, not ruined. In my opinion. So maybe
I think what would be kind of a cool idea going forward, with Book of Boba Fett, is to kind of give it like the subtitle of like The Mandalorian : The Book of Boba Fett. Because like I know like Ahsoka's like meant to take place kind of like within the same like Mandalorian time frame, like where that's set, and then like in that first season of Book of Boba Fett, we got basically like 2.5 kind of Mandalorian
that's what I was just about to say.
that were kind of like season 3.5, season 2.5 or whatever,
2.5, 3.5, yeah.
But and just because of like how connected it is to like the Mando story, and it would be would be a cool way to expand upon like the Boba Fett stuff, but maybe not be like wholly reliant on being its own separate thing, just because of how much they kind of built him up already, like within like that second season of The Mandalorian. And I think he and like Boba Fett and Din Djarin like work really well off one another, like when they're together on screen. So I think like doing stuff like that, maybe like if it's like adventures of like Din and Boba Fett with Ming-Na. For some reason I'm like
you just want to say Ming-Na.
Fennec Shand. For some reason I wasn't remembering her name for a second, but
her name sounds like it belongs in Hunger Games to me. Fennec.
Oh yeah, kind of interchangeable, but yeah, and like you said, like the kind of headlines sometimes for websites are kind of written specifically to get you to click on them to look at the article, and then you see that it's just this quote of like if they had just posted that quote on Twitter, you wouldn't have ever gone to their website to check.
And I understand that. I've done that ploy with things I've posted, but
and there's like,
go ahead.
There's like 5 paragraphs written before you even get to that quote.
It's like when you look up a recipe and you have to read their life story on.
Oh man.
And you're just like, just give me the damn ingredients.
The first time I ate this clam chowder, I was but a boy in Vermont.
Every time I start reading those, I just think about that scene from is it Pulp Fiction where Christopher Walken's like, I kept this thing in my ass.
Oh yeah, with
the watch.
Yeah.
But
I kept this recipe carved up my butt.
I'd like to see him maybe explore Boba Fett's beginnings. We know he's basically Jango Fett because he's a clone. Like he finds his dad's head. Where does he go from there? Like, how does he become?
Yeah. So they did cover some of that in the Clone Wars series, and like Daniel Logan even came back and voiced Boba in that too. But there is some stuff that they never got to put in the series because like when Disney acquired Lucasfilm, the show was airing at that point in time on Cartoon Network, so it kind of just ended abruptly.
We're done.
But then it came back. Yeah, but then it came back recently, like this past year, with the final season on Disney Plus. And there was still like some stuff that they didn't like finish, like because there was already like episodes that were written and that were within the animatic stage. Like you can search some of the stuff and find it up. There was like an episode that had with Cad Bane. Yeah, I'm assuming everybody can hear Sylvie freaking out right now. She's like, I love Boba Fett so much. I love him.
Mike's wrong.
But yeah, we're like there was like it was a duel between Cad Bane and Boba Fett where they kind of did it again here in this first season of Book of Boba Fett, but it was like and like you saw like how Boba Fett got the dent in his helmet. It was like supposed to be from that duel. So I think it could be cool if they did do like flashbacks again, but like do it the way that like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series did the flashbacks. And then they could still bring Daniel Logan back to do like the younger Boba Fett stuff. And like he is actually closer to the age that Boba Fett is meant to be in the Book of Boba Fett than Tamara Morrison is, which is kind of funny in a weird way. But yeah, I think if they do certain things with the story, I would definitely look forward to it. I mean, if anything, it's Star Wars.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
More Star Wars for the win. But yeah, that's gonna wrap up our news segment. So from there, we'll get straight into our discussion of the last 4 episodes of the ILM docuseries Light and Magic. So for the 4th episode, it was called I Think I Found My People. And I want to say I think that this might have been my favorite episode of like the entire 6 parts of it. This was like the era of like the 80s blockbuster. And ILM was kind of thriving like with all the different films that they're working on. We could kind of see that there was a revolution of like change and stuff that was kind of just like on the horizon of stuff. And like this one, they had like it kind of starts with them talking about doing Return of the Jedi, and then one of the things I thought was funny was that I want to say it was Phil Tippett that he said it was basically like a Rancor was pretty much like a cross between a bear and a potato.
Yep, that was Phil Tippett.
And then I thought it was interesting that like at one point they had tried basically doing it like Godzilla with like a guy in a suit for like the Rancor, and then they tried like all like these different things.
Yeah, there was like 6 people in the suit doing different things.
Oh yeah, like all this different stuff with like the stop motion for like how fast they would play it back or
didn't they do it like backwards?
Yeah, like backwards, and then like at like a certain frame rate so that it would look just. I think it was interesting like how they did all that stuff. I thought it was pretty cool.
The one thing in the beginning, not the beginning, but when they're talking about Jedi, I forget his name. It was his first time being visual effects supervisor, and he was just like, "We had to create this asteroid field, so we used potatoes. I used yogurt lids. Basically just picked stuff out of the trash and was just
like a gum and like one of his shoes.
Yeah,
and it's like nothing that you're gonna notice while you're watching because it's like all stuff that's like way in the back, but it is funny to know. Like I know like in like more recent stuff with like CG, like they have literally put like a kitchen sink floating in space so that they can say they put everything in it and the kitchen sink.
Right. I wish I could remember his name. It's gonna bother me.
Yeah, it was like one of the founding.
Yeah.
I can picture in my head too, but I can't remember the name either. I know it wasn't Richard Edmund, but he also left around that same time, like after Jedi ended, just because it sounded like he thought like it was getting kind of like too corporate. Yeah. And he went off and started his own studio at that point in time.
It's just funny that too corporate, and it was like not even close to corporate.
Yeah.
It might be now. But...
the other thing that happened around then too that I thought was interesting was that Joe Johnston had planned on leaving and was going to use like the money that he hadn't had any time to spend yet to like go travel around the world, and Lucas basically offered to keep him on at like half pay, not even like having to like work, and that he would also then pay for him to go to USC and take film school, or like go to film school basically. And then like while he was there, like he shot like a student film, which was probably way better than
anyone else's student film.
Yeah, just because like he had already like done like 3 freaking Star Wars movies and a few other films as well. And he also thinks because of that like Lucas probably also put his name in to essentially get him
right.
Honey I Shrunk the Kids to direct at that point too, which I liked this little bit of the episode too, because it kind of did like this brief like spotlight on Joe Johnston like with his films, because it showed like Honey I Shrunk the Kids, The Rocketeer,
Jumanji,
Jurassic Park 3, Jumanji.
Oh, he did. I didn't miss the Jurassic Park 3 one. He's responsible for that. Oh,
hey, Jurassic Park 3 is not that bad a movie
compared to Jurassic World 1 through 3. You're correct.
But and then he also did Captain America: The First Avenger as well too. And
okay, I got respect for him again.
Yeah, and I really liked like pretty much all the movies that he's done. They all have kind of like this like certain not it's all like this kind of like outsider type reference point of view, and between like Zelensky and like Honey I Shrunk the Kids, or like Steve Rogers and Captain America, or even like Alan Parrish and Jumanji, you can all see like this kind of certain theme and like narrative throughout like the movies that he's done. So I've always liked that. But I think that's cool that they did this little bit of a highlight on him. And I thought,
well, didn't he produce this?
Well, he was. I think so. I think a lot of the people that were like the founding members of ILM also worked on this as producers for the docuseries too, with Kasdan. But the next thing that came from there was they started talking about John Knoll, who is still at ILM today, and he talked about,
even with all that Photoshop money.
Yeah. Where he like called and like while he was like on a business trip with his dad at like the Anaheim Convention Center across from Disneyland, on like a lark he looked up to see if Industrial Light and Magic was in the phone book, and they were, and he called and talked to somebody, and they offered to give him a tour, and he was like 15 years old.
Hey, give this kid a tour.
I was like, man,
okay.
Yeah, I was like, man, like late 1980s, so like
so easy to do anything.
Yeah.
Just look at Stranger Things. Look at like, because I just finished watching that again. 80s. The parents are just like, the kids are just out doing whatever the hell they want. We don't care. Oh wait, people are dying. Yeah. I guess we gotta care.
Yeah. Generation X. Basically, they left in the morning, came back at like just after the sun went down, and your parents would be like, "Oh, did you have a good day?" Yep. All right.
Bye.
See you later. But yeah. And like this, I just thought that was cool. And then like, later on he would go to like college and then eventually make his way to Pixar. But then like his brother, Thomas Knoll, and he developed Photoshop together. And I thought that was interesting. It was more or less kind of like a dare where like John Knoll said to his brother that he thought it had like a kind of like a mass use type of thing, which I thought was interesting. And this was also around the same time that Ed Catmull was still at Industrial Light and Magic, and they had developed the Pixar image computer, which was like the origin of Pixar. That was also when they brought like John Lasseter in to do animation with that Pixar image computer as well. And you had like a note in here too
Yeah,
that I'll let you take.
It's just funny because in this episode they also, towards the end, Lucas is like talking about how Ed and John were in a closet making cartoons. They didn't share his vision, so he sold them off to someone who would support them because he didn't want to make cartoons. And then Steve Jobs buys them, makes like Pixar, and like Lucas could like he had his own vision. He just couldn't move away from, which okay, great, worked out well for him. Not saying it didn't, but he could have had Pixar too. Like had he just
And what's funny too is like this going with the Photoshop stuff. If you go into Photoshop now, you can still save an image file as one of the options, and there's still to save an image file as a Pixar image. So that's still one of the options if you go into Photoshop today. You can still select that. But and then like if people want to know more about like the whole like Pixar story part of this too, there's a documentary of the Pixar story that's also on Disney Plus that Leslie Iwerks did, which basically takes like kind of starts here and like goes up to the rest of the Pixar story from there and beyond. But yeah, like I thought that was kind of interesting, like almost like how much disdain like he had for them like wanting to do like anything else with the Pixar image computer at all. I thought that was kind of interesting, especially because like later on, like we talked about, like they had LucasArts Animation that would do like the Clone Wars,
right?
So
he just had it in his head like what he wanted to do, and throughout it's a kind of a common theme throughout this whole thing is if Lucas wants this, he's basically gonna get it, and if you stand in your way or do something that just kind of irks him, you get lopped off.
And I thought it was interesting how much like innovation like came out of there as far as like stuff
there's so much
like defined like within the industry, like between like Photoshop and we haven't talked about it yet, but like the digital editing systems like Avid.
So bad, I hate like, Avid.
Just but then like digital sound editing as well, and then we haven't gotten to it yet, but like like digital filmmaking and like all of this stuff that originated out of Industrial Light and Magic that came first from this studio, like they were the first one to do it, develop it, and then kind of how funny like this and cyclical the like nature of the stuff was with like Disney passed on making Star Wars.
Now they own
so
Star
he
Wars.
went to he went to Fox. Lucas had Pixar, sold it, and then
went to Disney.
then Joe Johnston worked on a Marvel movie. He had worked at ILM, and then like all these years later, Disney owns Fox, Disney owns Pixar, Disney owns Marvel.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny that even though they passed on Star Wars, they still now got it, and they actually paid more than they would have if they had just bought Star Wars in 1977.
Yep, that's how it goes. Like I forgot you sent me something. Oh no, I sent you it about Sony and Spider-Man. How they only bought Spider-Man for X amount of money because they thought all the other Marvel stuff was garbage, and now Marvel's begging Sony to get Spider-Man back. They could make so much money off it now. It's the inverse of this story, but just crazy how interconnected they all are. Incestuous, even.
Yeah, almost. But yeah, going from there, that would then bring us to episode 5, Morfing, spelled with an F, not with a PH.
Despite what the dictionary says.
Yeah, as Dennis Murin would tells us in this part of it. So like this is the digital age, kind of brings new challenges to ILM, but not like everyone there is ready for such of like massive changes with it. So now, have you seen Willow?
Not in a long, long time. I remember watching it with Josh Taylor at his house at one point. The only thing I remember
Shout out to Josh.
is
shout out, yeah.
the get me some water peck scene.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't seen Willow in so long.
I think I only saw it for the first time like a number of years ago, but I enjoyed it. I thought Val Kilmer was definitely in the 1980s Val Kilmer that we all know and love. In it,
not the current one that was in Top Gun Maverick. You mean?
Yeah, poor guy. But and I'm looking forward to the Disney Plus series continuation of Willow too, so that should be interesting. But the whole morphing sequence in Willow was interesting, as like how they explained that, and like how it was like a mix of like the effects workshop like doing like the intermediate parts of like the animal morphing with like the ostrich that had the peacock feathers on the back of it, and then like she showed how it was almost like an umbrella type thing that like would push the feathers out like that, and like that weird like half turtle half
tiger
thing with like the legs, and then like the half woman half tiger thing, and then what was the other part of it?
Was a sheep or a goat or something.
Oh yeah, the goat that you could stretch its neck so that it would go into the ostrich neck. And then basically the computer would do like the intermediate morphing in between. And I liked Ron Howard in here too, where he's like I didn't want to question it because I didn't want to look or sound dumb. So I was just like, yep, that looks good.
You get to see old footage of Ron Howard with his porn star mustache too.
Yeah, rocking that mid '80s mustache,
the Magnum stash.
Yeah, I remember he had that when he came back for like the final episode of Happy Days too. He had that sweet stash going on. But yeah, he would rock that stash for a while. And then like they went into like the effects work on Ghostbusters 2, so that was kind of interesting. Like with like the whole like the goo like underground sequence with that, and like it was cool to see like how they developed like the Slimer. Puppet in there too, and like the guy that was like wearing the Slimer puppet thing, like I didn't realize that too, with that was under there. Like when I went there a couple of years ago, they still have that Slimer like on display in one of the areas. They also have the painting from Ghostbusters 2, the not the one from the final part of the movie with the Ghostbusters, but with Vigo on it.
Oh,
so I remember I took a picture. I took a picture in front of that, and they have like I remember what the name of the brothers are, but like during the courtroom sequence with like the two ghosts that are like in the electric chairs, they have like those like above like these walls there. But it's cool to see some of that stuff in person.
You're from the home of the electric chair, so you should have taken a picture with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did take pictures of those. They're I think I don't know remember where I posted them though, but. And I thought like one of the things they said there was like the result and the render was everything, and this was one of the other things that you and I have said like last time, was one of them straight up said in this was a lot of life is being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and that's all this really is. Like all these people, the band of rebels is, I think, or gang of rebels, as they refer to, is just oh, I can't work right now, but this guy over here can, and he knows someone, and then he knows someone, and then they all get hired, and here we are 40, 50 years later.
Yeah, and they just happen to be like the best of
everything,
whatever their specific thing was at that point. And then this was also at the same time like the model shop transitioned over to computer graphics, so they kind of showed in here like a bit like where it would rub some of the people the wrong way, like within like the model shop, because it was kind of like the slow exodus from basically what had initially built up in Ben ILM from its creation for like what they were making, and like showing like all like the like props and models that they made for like those original films, and then like how some of them basically like I don't remember who it was, but she had said something like she just saw it as like another form of a different kind of paintbrush to use.
Yeah.
To create as well.
She didn't view it as like a negative. She was like, it's just a different tool. Yeah. I can still do my particular craft. Just like what she was beating around the bush saying is like, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm gonna adapt. I don't want to die.
Yeah. And then she said some people like looked at her like or like gave her like dirty looks and stuff like that. It like
they referred to it
was
as
like
the
very
Empire. I believe is one line that was used.
Or like the dark side or something like that. And it was like almost like very clicky, almost like we're like you're here, we're here, blah blah blah.
And then Dennis Muren's just like, I'm everywhere.
Yeah, and I feel like he's like really the only one like left. I think he's still there.
I think so.
Of the original, like it. I think maybe like in just like a consultant role, but like of like that original group of like the what would be like the ILM equivalent of like Disney's 9 Old Men for like animators
right.
at Walt Disney Studios would be like that for ILM. And then like this is like where they got into like this kind of little segment of this part of the episode where they were talking about the pit, which used to be it was like a soundproof room.
I forgot what they said. It was the editing studio.
Yeah, it was like what Lucas had used to use for that. And so it was the animator Steve quote unquote Spaz Williams and then Marc A.Z. DePay. Both they kind of like became like these really like good friends.
Well, yeah, it's funny
that they worked in there together.
When they first started talking about him, like I was expecting like we hated each other based on how.
Like almost like an Odd Couple type thing.
And the pit makes me think of the movie PCU. So shout out to anyone who's seen PCU. If you have not seen PCU, check that out. It's a 90s. It's basically Animal House in the 90s, starring Jeremy Piven and David Spade.
It's probably there's probably a few questionable things in that nowadays.
It's definitely not PCU anymore because the joke was it was politically correct in a university.
Oh, there you go. And what I thought was kind of interesting or kind of cool when I was looking up, because I couldn't remember Steve Williams' name for this when I was putting together our show notes, as I talked to you about the software, that they made a whole documentary just about this guy too. That like after watching all of Light and Magic, I'll be definitely curious to check that out.
We got the name of.
We'll
Spaz,
get more into.
You got to figure out why.
Yeah, we'll get more into him in a second too. But it was funny, like when they kind of briefly talked to George Lucas about him, like Luke, he was like Spaz, and then he just kind of like smiled for a second, like he was having like a memory of something that he was remembering about him. And they were talking about like all these parties those two had in that room, and like how like
trash the
office would be destroyed and junk. They said because they could just play like loud music in there, and no one else could hear it because it was soundproof. But I thought that like that was kind of an interesting thing, and like I said, we'll get into him more in a second when we get to episode 6. But and then this is also where they started talking about Doug Chang, who would go on to be like the art department head for like the prequels, and they kind of talked about like his whole backstory here, and he's still there as well too. He's still like working on like the Mandalorian. Like so whenever you see like that concept art that shows at the end of him a lot of the times, not all the time but a lot of the times.
I thought it was funny that it wasn't this episode, but it was the next episode where he's like, I thought I sucked, so I had to give myself homework every week.
Yeah,
and that homework became
and then and basically his his portfolio was all like stuff that kind of vibed with like exactly what Lucas wanted for it too. And then this episode, this part 5, it had a lot of James Cameron in it too, because it had stuff with like the Abyss in there, with like the whole water sequence with that, and like how like they talked. I think it was John Knoll was the one that was on set for that, and he's talking about like if you just added a little bit of like a shadow or black.
No, that was Dennis Mirren who said that. I'm pretty sure.
Or was it? Okay. But like if you added basically like a little bit of an imperfection into like the CG water, it made it look more natural and not as much of like a just kind of magic trick of something happening on screen thing.
Main animator for it or something like that. I don't know. But it was Mirren who said add the imperfection and it made it better.
Yeah. And then they kind of go in more into Terminator 2 there with like the early stages of like the stop motion tech.
Yeah, if you want to see Robert
like
Patrick
the
in
motion
his,
capture, yeah.
Tidy whities running down the street covered in black lines.
Oh yeah. Like the original versions of like doing like like the 3D scans of like the actors' faces and whatnot for stuff like that. But yeah, I thought that was funny, like how he's just outside, just like straight up, just in his tighty whitey underwear,
just covered in black. It looked like Hellraiser without the spikes.
Yeah,
but that was interesting because like all this stuff they basically, I don't know if they invented the stop motion capture or whatever we're calling it. I don't know if they invented that, but it was just like the early stages from what they did then to what they have now, where it's just dots or pajamas with QR looking codes on them.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in a bit because I have a section here of like the notable milestones from 85 onward. But then this episode kind of ends with like this little bit of a cliffhanger of with Jurassic Park on the horizon. So from there we went to episode 6, which is called No More Pretending You're Dinosaurs. And CG finally came into its own with Jurassic Park, and then paving the way for a new era of innovation. So basically up until nowadays. And then so this kind of starts with like the whole discussion of like Phil Tippett and doing stop motion dinosaurs for Jurassic Park. And then what did you think about like this whole section?
I enjoyed it, and it's kind of disheartening to think about Jurassic Park being like, it's revered as like one of the best movies Spielberg ever made, but it's such an advancement in the movie technology at the time that a whole bunch of people just lost their jobs. Like, so you got to think like everyone's loving this movie, and there's this cadre of people that are like, this is traumatic for me because I no longer have a job because of computers. Like, and then I'm also thinking they wanted it to be a Phil Tippett stop motion opus masterpiece, whatever Spaz was calling it. It's I can't imagine that movie in that style of stop motion. Even when they showed the raptor sequence, which essentially they recreated in CGI, it was just so vastly different.
Yeah. And like what I thought was like interesting here too was like when they like this whole like discussion of like when so and like that trailer that I told you about for this documentary about the Steve Williams dude who was apparently not, who was in the military but wasn't in the army. He was in like, he said he was in like some,
he was in the Canadian military.
Yeah, he said he was like in some group that he can't talk about. So that was interesting, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But there's like this whole discussion about like, so like the documentary for this Steve Williams thing, like the tagline on it was, the greatest revolution in cinema history was all his fault. So, well, yeah, because so like he was,
to start this episode, like everyone's telling them like, it's stop motion, you're not working on it, no, stop. And then he went and created a 3D walking T-Rex skeleton that they played on a loop and then Kathleen Kennedy was like, "The hell is that?" So then he got some leeway.
They just kind of be like, they just kind of had it like playing in the background, be like, oh,
that?
what's it? Oh, nothing. But yeah, and like it is kind of crazy. Like just because of that, like Jurassic Park is basically kind of like the peak of the mountain, like where like everything happened before it was done one way, and then everything that happened after it was completely done a different way. Like they talked about watching just like that short little animated segment in the screening room,
like, jumping and cheering and crying, watching a T-Rex
and
walk.
like how Phil Tippett, like he was like being gracious, like in like professional everything. And Spielberg was telling him that he was still going to work on the movie. He didn't lose his job or anything. And he just asked him how he felt, and he's like, "Well, I feel extinct." And he's like, "Oh, that's a good line. I'm gonna put that in the movie."
I don't think it ended up in the movie. I was thinking about that. I was like, I can't remember.
I think it is like there's a variation of it, or like Alan Grant says, he's like, "So what do you think?" He's like, "I think we just became extinct." Like for paleontologists.
Gotcha. I had to rewatch. I haven't watched Jurassic Park in a long time either. I have the Blu-ray box set of the first three.
Nice. With the Joe Johnson movie. No.
The fun fact about Jurassic Park and South Park, how they're intertwined. After the first season of South Park, where they did everything in basically stop motion, the hell is the material? Construction paper cutouts. They bought the used computers either from ILM or from some company that had the same exact ones as ILM to make South Park for a good amount of years. After they were like, we're done with this technology, it's advanced way further. So they used the Jurassic Park computers to make South Park for a little while.
Oh yeah, that was cool. And so like they kept Phil Tippett on, so he was basically there to like show them like how
dinosaurs move,
like how dinosaurs would move and how they would be handled. And then they had made
it's kind of cool.
This computer
I need one of these.
armature, the DID, essentially the dinosaur input device, so that like the model makers could still like basically do the same thing they were doing, but it would input the information into the computer so that the animators could then blend it from there, which I think is cool. That way you can keep people
they can still do stop motion. You don't have to build these elaborate models. Like it's still elaborate. This thing was crazy looking, especially for the time. Like you don't have to like make it look hyper realistic. You just make the armature, and then you can still do your stop motion. It's just instead of a camera, it's going into the computer.
And the other thing I thought was funny here was that Steve Williams had said that the lawyer getting in by the T-Rex is actually the T-1000 model from Terminator 2, but with shorts on. So I thought that was kind of funny. So it'd be something to kind of look. I mean, obviously it's not going to look like the T-1000. It's just like that same like data. CG model, basically.
I thought it was.
So I thought that was funny.
Funny watching them run around pretending to be dinosaurs, and the one guy tripped and broke his hand.
Oh yeah, and it was his drawing hand too. Yeah, and that's where the quote for this episode title came from too. Yeah, and you had someone else in here too, with like the Stan Winston.
Oh
T-Rex.
Yeah, I wanted. It probably didn't have anything to do with ILM because it was Stan Winston, but there's the famous story that like they built this huge T-Rex, and the one thing they tell Steven Spielberg is it can't get wet, and the first thing he does is film it in a rain scene.
Oh yeah, and then it's good, and then it was like shaking and
like
stuff,
completely wigging out. And I just like to hear more of the backstory on that and how true the story is. Because an earlier episode, like I was ruined by George Lucas biting a cheeseburger and seeing the Millennium Falcon story was ruined.
Oh yeah, well I remember that it's not from first Jurassic Park, but I remember a story that our college screenwriting professor told us, Carrie,
well, he was in
from like the Lost World.
So.
Yeah, Benjamin's dad, where he's talking about like where the T-Rex was supposed to bust through the window there, and they shot it like 3 different times, but each time the window would rip the latex on the T-Rex's face. So like that's why I ended up getting paid 3 times about what he was meant to get paid for that, because he had to come back 3 different days. And then that's why in the movie it just cuts after the T-Rex roars and stuff. But I thought, I always think about that when I watch that movie, is like, oh yeah, the T-Rex is actually supposed to come through the window and eat them, but because its face kept getting ripped, it doesn't.
I forgot that story.
Yeah, but yeah. And then I think this was also where digital film cameras came in. You had a little bit of, you had a note on here too.
Because they start talking about Sony's making this digital film camera, and Lucas got wind of it, and so he calls Sony. Oh, they got to film 24 frames per second. Can't be 30. And Sony's like, we can't do that. Oh, yeah, you can. Just do it.
Oh, yeah.
And then they do it.
Yeah.
And this man he's using Jedi mind tricks on these people. I swear.
Yeah, and then he had Panavision make a lens for it that would fit.
But they said they can do it.
As well, too.
They were like, yeah, we can do that.
They're like, yeah.
But it was...
Yeah, because this was like around the time that he was starting to shoot Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Which they touched on these a lot less than I thought they were going to, like with the special edition films or the prequels. And
I think that comes down
to kind of interesting.
I forget who says the line. He's one of the newer guys in ILM. He comes in towards the end, bald, kind of like has no hair, even eyebrows, I think. White dude was just like, most people go to movies now knowing what CGI, like how CGI works, or they think they know. So I think that might have been their take. Was like everyone kind of knows how CGI works from this point on. So we don't really need to show you that much.
At least that's how film Twitter acts, as far as like when they see trailers for She-Hulk or anything else like that. But this is like this next part I thought was kind of interesting too, just because you and I are both projectionists at a movie theater like around this time too, where like digital projectors started coming in, and like he was talking about like how they essentially had to give the digital projectors to a bunch of theaters because they were so expensive, and then they would eventually get paid back. I remember that too. It was like when our theater got the 2-hole digital projectors that it had, like how big of a deal
Which theater was that?
The Movieplex.
Because they didn't have them when I worked there.
It was those two. It was the 9 and 10, like the newer side theaters. It was when when we had Revenge of the Sith.
Those were film. They were analog.
Yeah. Were they?
They were.
I know they got changed to digital.
They were the first ones to get changed there, but not at this point in time.
Okay.
Because I remember those frickin' things breaking all the damn time. And one time there was a brain wrap in some movie, and it was someone who worked there, so I started it for him, even though we didn't sell any tickets. And he just came up like, brain wrap, bye. And so I had to fix it until like 3 in the morning, and I got done, and I turn around, and I forget the movie. It's a Jude Law movie, and it's just his...
Alfie?
Maybe. It was just him smiling all smugly, and I punched him in the face as hard as I could, and it was a brick wall. I like sprained my wrist. I probably broke something.
Oh man!
I was so mad, and then I see Jude Law just smirking at me, and I just wail.
Side note to people that don't know what a brain wrap is: that is when the film would get wrapped around the platter that it was on, and yeah, well the film was running. But
you know when the movie would stop and start melting on the screen, and you're like, "What just happened?" That's a brain wrap.
Yeah, I remember that happened to my parents when I went to go see one of the Mission Impossible movies, and it happened like right. I think it was in part 2, and it was like right when they jump off the motorcycles and they were in midair, and the film did that, and they thought it was part of the movie because of it being a Mission Impossible movie, and then the movie never started again. They're like, "Oh, that wasn't part of the movie." Yeah.
Now we also at this time we were supposed to see the digital one in Rochester, and I bought the tickets specifically for that one, and then they were selling so many tickets for Revenge of the Sith, they just moved the theaters around, and we got bumped to a non-digital theater.
Oh man! But I do remember we watched like Revenge of the Sith twice before it even came out. Because I remember we put it together like 2 or 3 days before it came out.
People camped out getting pissed.
Yeah, because it was like us and the rest of the employees there watched it together.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah. But like, spoiler alert, Anakin becomes Darth Vader. But yeah, and so yeah. The next thing that happened in the documentary here was our buddy Hal Hickel was discussing Iron Man, and I thought this was funny. You have a note in here too about funny. Robert Downey Jr.
It's like Jon Favreau was like, I don't want CGI. It looks like crap. So they built this suit for Robert Downey Jr. and he could barely move in it. And like the very next line is, Robert Downey Jr. got really comfortable in those pajamas we made him. And they just show him rolling around on the floor and like the suit with like the QR looking codes on them, whatever they're called. Motion capture.
Yeah, what I thought was funny too is Hal talked about they were like showing Favreau like the scene from the movie, and he was like making notes for what he thought was the physical suit from the movie, and then Hal was like, no, that's the CG model.
I remember,
and he's like, oh,
watching Iron Man.
I was like, then I have no notes.
In the theaters when it first came out, and just being like amazed at how like so realistic looking.
Yeah, Hell, I had all the like this good stuff in here, like about like if you do it right, people will like see like the weight and the kind of like texture to an object in it, and like they'll believe that they can basically like physically interact with it. Then like when you stop questioning if that's CG or if it's practical, then like they've done their job. When you're not like when you can't see what they did. But I thought that was interesting, and then it kind of like skips ahead quite a ways up until like just a few years ago, with the volume and stagecraft, which like has been used like widely like on like the Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it was even used recently a bit on like Thor: Love and Thunder, amongst other things.
Yeah, and this whole
and you had a note here too.
It's just it's funny because going to film school, learning about the history, they talk about the studio system, which was in the 100 years ago, this time, and how studios you'd sign an actor for X amount of movies, and then he'd make every movie in like a weekend essentially, because it was all on stages and backlots, and this reminded me of that system. Like, you just have this wall of 1,000 LED working monitors going in unison, and you can project whatever you need to on there and just like move some stuff around, put some green boxes out, put in some set pieces digitally, and you could film something like so much faster. Like even Lucas was talking about, he goes, if we'd had this set up back when I made Star Wars, it would have been like a mile-long set. I was like,
yeah.
And then Favreau, I forget the time frame. He's like, what used to take you blah, 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 will now take us 3 days.
Yeah, and like Lucas was talking about, like this was always like the vision of what he had wanted to do in his head. So I know he's kind of more or less retired at this point, but I think it would be cool to, like, if he wanted to have him come back and like direct or do like one of like the newer Star Wars projects, just to get like his take like on this kind of like new Disney era of Star Wars, and like using like the volume and stagecraft for that, to see like what he would do with it, just and see was there to help innovate so much of the stuff along the lines like we said with like digital filmmaking, digital sound editing, all of that. And then like this was like one of the only things that like a critique that I have of it, and it's not like of a bad thing, more that I just wanted
more
a little bit more. Like I felt like this could have had been like at least one more episode, because this part 6 moves from 93 with Jurassic Park to 2022 within like that hour, whereas like most of these other episodes, like I think they go maybe like over the course of like 4 to 6 or maybe 7 years at the most over the course of those episodes, whereas like this one just like it's like, and here's the past 35 years.
Yeah, it was. You're right. I wish there was more, but at the same time, going back to my previous comment, they probably felt like, you know how it works now. You saw us develop Photoshop. You saw us develop CGI. Here you go. But they could have talked. Maybe they didn't. Maybe Lucas told them not to. Their animation company that they end up like finally making, like, what was it? Rango was their first feature film.
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's like the only animated film that ILM has done. I think that would have been cool to talk about. But so like going from here, I'll talk about or we'll highlight some of the notable milestones from 1985, where we left off in the last episode up to today. So 1985, they had the first completely computer-generated character for the Stained Glass Man in Young Sherlock Holmes, and that was done with the Pixar Image Computer as well. And then 1988 was the first morphing sequence in Willow. 89, they had the first digital compositing of a full screen live action image during the final sequence of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And then 89 also had the first computer-generated 3D character to show motion with the pseudopod creature in the abyss. 91 was the first dimensional matte painting, where a traditional matte painting was mapped onto a 3D geometry, allowing for like a camera parallax in the movie Hook.
Underrated movie.
Yeah, and they still have this matte painting hanging up in ILM too. It's really cool. Like if they sold a print of that, I would buy that, because it's that, you know, the overhead shot of Ron Williams flying over Neverland as Peter Pan. That's a matte painting, and it's just like hanging in the wall there. I think that would be cool to have just as like a piece of art. 91 was the first partially computer-generated main character for the T-1000 and T2 Judgment Day. 92 was the first time the texture of human skin was computer-generated in Death Becomes Her. That old chestnut. 93 was the first time digital technology was used to create a complete and detailed living creature for the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, which earned ILM its 13th Oscar.
They haven't won many since then,
and then,
surprisingly. I looked it up. They're only at 16.
That's weird. Well, I guess because they innovated so much then, like they built them all up. Yeah. 94 was the first extensive use of digital manipulation of historical and stock footage to integrate characters in Forrest Gump.
I have to pay.
95. Yeah, I thought it was cool. I touched on that a little bit with Robert Zemeckis in here. 95 was the first fully synthetic speaking computer-generated character with a distinct personality and emotion to take a leading role in Casper.
Casper.
Which, another underrated movie. 95, first computer-generated photorealistic hair and fur used for the digital lion and monkeys in Jumanji. 96 was the first completely computer-generated main character for Draco in Dragonheart. Remember Dragonheart?
Never watched it.
Sean Connery as a dragon. 99 was the first computer-generated character to have a full human anatomy with Imhotep in the Mummy.
Of course it was the Mummy.
In 2000 creates open EXR imaging format. And then 2006 was they developed iMocap systems. So this is what we were talking about, which uses the computer vision techniques to track live action performers on set. So this was like one of the movies that like Hal won an Oscar for using the creation of Davy Jones and the ship's crew and Dead Man's Chest. Like they completely don't even touch on this. And they're like, there's like that like little clip of like Davy Jones like in the opening of the like the show, and like that little bit at the end. But I was like, I want to know about that.
Well, I kind of, because Lord of the Rings did something similar, Weta.
Yeah, with Weta.
So I'm just curious. Maybe there's some debate amongst the industry.
I don't know. But then, like you said, 2011 first animated feature produced by ILM, and as of now, still the only animated feature that ILM has produced. Hal was the animation director on that too. And if you haven't seen this, I shared it on the Animation Fascination Instagram the other day. But there's video you can find of they shot like live action reference footage of basically of the entire movie of Rango.
Yeah.
Like
I haven't even seen Rango. So.
Oh man, you gotta watch Rango. Just think of like an entire movie animated by ILM, and that's how.
I didn't know they did it until this. So.
Definitely check it out, and like because they didn't touch on Rango at all in here too. It's just like this whole other, I don't know, there's a whole other episode they could have done. But I thought, but yeah, that whole thing is really cool. It's like all of the actors in that movie, like they're like it's basically would be like a local theater like stage play almost. Really? It looks like they're performing, but like in Thor when they have the audio
replay done by.
Yeah, it's basically them doing that, but then they just have like the mics under them, so they're getting, because Gore Verbinski wanted like realistic kind of elements for the sound. And then the last notable milestone was just back in 2019 for the use of a real-time rendering with the Unreal Game Engine and digital LED displays as virtual set, known as Stagecraft or the volume for The Mandalorian. Yeah. So, yeah, they've done a lot of firsts.
It's crazy how much they just invented or just like, I'm thinking about Steve Williams' Spaz there. The dinosaur, we're here to make them run. And all the experts, T-Rexes don't run. Yeah, well, Spielberg wants them to run. It doesn't look right. Yeah. So I write this code and create an algorithm to do this and reduce stuff by 20%, and it works. Like, just the sheer ability to just, this is what I should try. Just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, And then he said once he had it figured out, it was easy to do like the other sequences for it, which I thought was cool.
And then the other part is with CGI, the advent of CGI. Just to listen to them talk, like this movie only had 80 shots of CGI. It's like now every movie made has like 1 million shots of CGI.
Oh yeah, that's the last thing I kind of to talk about too. Is that like they talked about this whole thing that Lucas was doing during Phantom Menace, where he was like doing this like digital compositing, where like he would have like one of the actors did something in one of the takes that he liked more than another take, so he would do like basically take them from that one take and cut around like basically Liam Neeson in the shot, so that like Panaka's over here doing what he liked more in that other take,
right?
In the same, like in a different take that he liked more of what Liam Neeson was doing. And like John Knoll said something later on where he would be like on a movie that would be, you know, like something that you wouldn't even think of for effects, and he would tell them, he'd be like, oh yeah, if you like this part, you can just composite around that and do this there in that background and and the director would be like, really? Be like, yeah, it's real easy. It would be like not even like a thing like on like just like a low, quote unquote, low budget thing compared to like let's say like a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, he just like invented that because John Knoll was like, I'm just stressing out. Like, George, this doesn't exist. This doesn't exist.
Yeah, to like create all of this stuff for the first time. Like, like the huge like shot of like all the Gungans and droids in Phantom Menace. Like they had to figure that out.
Nobody's ever done that before.
All right. Well. Here
just think about it. His famous adage.
Now, was there anything else from the docuseries that you wanted to bring up before we close out?
Not really. We covered most of it. If there is something I'm forgetting, it wasn't important, I guess. It's just crazy. I didn't know ILM had this depth to it, like the story behind it that it has. ILM for me, it's like the pinnacle. Like that's what you see. Every movie that's worth watching, ILM did the graphics, and when you watch the credits, and you never realize all the stuff that they did in the early on, especially computer-wise, because you think about computers and you're like, 70s and 80s, computers sucked. Granted, you can say, well, a computer sent the person to the moon had less power than an iPhone does now. So just the things they were able to do, and what we complain about our computer's lack of being able to do. Just makes you think.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, and it's really cool just like how much.
Oh, I did love when they're talking about the volume and the stagecraft. That Deborah Chow was like, I showed up, they put a VR headset on me, and I felt it was a test that if I couldn't do this. She's like, good thing I played a lot of PlayStation.
Yeah, I thought that was funny too. And Deborah Chow directed all of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And I take credit for that. I am Deborah Chow, remember? If you go back a couple episodes, I take credit for being Deborah Chow.
Yeah. There you go. But yeah, so that's going to do it for our discussion on the docuseries for Disney Plus called Light and Magic. But you guys can leave us a review on the podcast catcher of your choice, whether it's iTunes or Spotify or any of the ones that allow you to leave a review. Please do so. It helps us out a lot. You can find the show on social media at Twitter and Instagram just by looking for HoldoPod. On Facebook as well at HoldoPod, and then on YouTube for the Holdo Maneuver podcast. You can follow us individually also on Instagram and Twitter. I am just at my first and last name, Marc Bibbert, MarcBibbert.
Same, just search me, Michael Soren. Last name's not spelled how it sounds. It's Sawran. If you find someone in there who does not have a middle name or a middle initial, that's not me. I have a middle initial in some of the social media platforms, but if they're spouting racist stuff and kind of like right-wing propaganda, that's not me.
Correct. And then you can find our editor Vactor on Instagram and Twitter just by looking up that last name, Vactor. You can email us at holdopod@gmail.com if you'd like. And then, as always, we are grateful to George Lucas for creating the Star Wars universe.
Thank the maker.